Welcome in. Around the Octagon is back. Today we will be covering UFC 109 Vegas. Roman Dolidze taking on Fluffy Hernandez. I am joined by San and Ryan. Fellas, how we doing tonight?
Great. Let's rip it.
Good. Doing good.
Awesome. And before we really dive into this card too much, I wanted to kind of circle back to last week's main event. Tatsuro Taira put on an absolute clinic, had the knockdown early round one, and then just racked up control time. Round two, went out there, secured the takedown, got to the back, found the submission. Very impressive performance put on there by Tatsuro Taira. Ryan, that's your boy. My question for you is, what is next for Tatsuro Taira?
I mean, I think now, he got to look up in the rankings. So I'm looking at like a Brandon Moreno. I'm not entirely sure. I know he's ranked 6th at the time of the fight. Maybe he's moved up by now, maybe not. I know Hung Sung Park was unranked. But nevertheless, a very impressive win, dominated the entirety of the fight. I think Hung Sung Park only landed like 2 significant strikes, and it was just one-way traffic from there. Not even in terms of output on strikes, but, just like you said, grappling, control time. He had the knockdown a minute into round one, held him there the entire time and just worked his game plan. And he's only, 25 years old? I think now, after that loss to Brendan Royval, I think, it's time. He's proven himself again. He's going to dominate lower-level competition like Hung Sung Park, so I think it's only best to look up in the rankings. So, yeah, Brandon Moreno, title shot. That's what I'd like to see out of Tatsuro Taira if he can get it done. And he took no damage, so you could easily put that on like the UFC Noche card if he's up for it.
Yeah, I would say I definitely agree with you, but as an alternative probability, I think it would be cool to see if Josh Mann loses that title fight. I think it'd be a really cool fight to watch. Both of those guys are really active. They're both really young. They're both doing very well. I think it would just be an exciting one. A lot of heads would definitely turn for that fight. But before we do get into this fight card this weekend, I was telling Ryan earlier, I think we have to stop, kind of slow our roll when it comes to judging these cards. Since the Dustin Poirier card, which even that one people started calling pretty bad as far as matchups wise and fights they want to watch, the past 3 cards have been great. And it hasn't been like anything, other than Dustin Poirier and Max Holloway headliner, it hasn't been anything insane, but all these fights have been great. So I think it's I'm just gonna shut up and stop judging these cards and just tune in on Saturday because these guys that are unranked or lower ranked always have something to prove.
What I will say regarding that, Son, I don't disagree with you there, but where my criticism will come in is why the hell was this card put on at the UFC Apex? Like some of these fights needed to be in front of live crowds. You're sitting there and you have Matsumoto Rebecki and Chris Duncan. That was an absolute war. You need a live crowd for that fight. It not having a live crowd did it a disservice. And same to be said with the fight right before it between Elvis Brenner and Esteban Ribovics. How the hell was Esteban Ribovics not fighting in front of a main card or in front of a crowd again? That's like back-to-back fights at the Apex. This guy deserves a crowd. But if you tuned in and watched, it was a very entertaining fight night, I will say. But kind of circling back to Tatsuro Taira, I had a couple cents I wanted to throw in regarding him. And I know I already touched on his performance, but I really like that Brandon Moreno matchup that you put out there, Ryan. I've seen a few people call for that matchup, and I think it's very fun. And they do match up pretty well together, and I do think Tatsuro Taira can get the win in a Brandon Moreno matchup. And I know you just touched on Joshua Van as well, Son. I just don't want to see him wait that long because when's he going to be fighting Pantoja? That's not going to be till the end of the year. And then you think like 3-4 months after that. While it would be a very fun fight, I just don't know if the timeline makes sense. But regardless, Tatsuro Taira, hats off, fantastic performance. Now, moving on to the main card for this Saturday night's fight card, we have a middleweight bout to open this up between Eryk Anders and Christian Leroy Duncan. Eryk Anders has managed to kind of withstand the test of time. It almost seems like he's getting up there in age, but he still looks pretty good. Coming off a nice win a few months ago, it might have even been longer than that, against Chris Weidman. And on the flip side of that coin, you have CLD, who is also coming off a win himself against Andre Pulayev, who just fought this past weekend. So you had the 38-year-old vet versus the 30-year-old, not even a newcomer anymore, is CLD. And CLD is coming in at like a minus 600 favorite about, which is pretty wild. But with that being said, Son, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've historically touched on lines enough. Egregious. I think it's disgusting. Any fight over minus 500 is just kind of ridiculous. I don't think we could just gloss that over. But I think it's kind of a no-brainer. I think Christian Leroy Duncan takes this one. Obviously not going to be like, a super hot, crazy skilled fight. Obviously, he's fighting a 38-year-old. But I think he's just more durable. He's shown that in the past. I mean, taking Petrosian to decision, taking why am I blanking right now? Gregory Rodriguez, sorry, to decision as well. He's just a hardy guy. He's not looking to get finished. I think this one probably honestly does get finished because it's he's fighting a 38-year-old, so he's got a good chance for a finish here. But I don't think we need to say too much. I think the line speaks for itself. I think this one's a pretty straightforward. I think I got CLD with this one.
Yeah, San, I agree with you there. I think in all aspects, this should most likely be just a striking match. And if you give Christian Leroy Duncan a striking match, he's going to win that most times. Like you said, very durable fighter, very gritty fighter. And then the other thing is, I mean, Eric Anders does pose some threat in the takedowns, I guess, but I don't think he's that heavily of a grappler to give Christian Leroy Duncan any problems outside of maybe a couple of minutes. So this one, odds might be a little wild, but he'd still come out as a sizable favorite in my book anyway. So give me Christian Leroy Duncan by KO.
Yeah, I'll make it a sweep for Christian Leroy Duncan, but one thing I will say is Eric Anders is also very durable himself. He's only been finished twice in his career, once by knockout, once by sub. And that knockout finish, let's see, was back in 2018 against Thiago Santos. And he is a vet that is always there. He seems to be in very good shape. I know he's like quit alcohol and whatnot, and he's living that like holistic, I don't know if that's the right word, but like holistic lifestyle. So I will say Eric Anders is durable. He is making the right lifestyle decisions, but Christian Leroy Duncan should just be much quicker, should be able to find his shots. And I also see him kind of walking Eric Anders to, my guess here is going to be a UD, but we shall see. And moving on, we have a bantamweight bout between Miles Johns and Gene Matsumoto. Matsumoto is coming off a short notice loss to Rob Font, which is not a bad loss by any means. Took it on a few days' notice and went out there and lost a split decision, one in which he had a lot of success with the wrestling. He had a lot of control time and looked pretty good. Some people make the argument that he won that fight. On the flip side of that coin, Miles Johns, he's coming off a loss to Felipe Lima, and I think Felipe Lima did or kind of showed what it takes to really beat Miles Johns. I don't think Miles Johns is really too spectacular at anything, to be completely honest. He's just one of those fighters that's good all around, pretty solid. But enough said on my end here. Ryan, I want to hear your opinion on this one.
Yeah, I'm taking Gene Matsumoto on this one. He's a young Brazilian prospect, with a couple of decent wins under his belt. Like you said, short notice fight in his last one against Rob Font, which is no tall task for anyone in the UFC. And he just looks better everywhere. I mean, he can strike, he can hang in there, but then ultimately this comes down to his wrestling and his grappling ability. And I think he should have swift control over this fight for the entire 15 minutes that it goes, if it goes that far. Might even sneak in a sub win there.
Yeah, I'm sided with Gene as well. I think just in general, he should have the advantage in most areas. I think the grappling is definitely going to be good. And I think this year is just a year for these young fighters, man. I mean, 25 years old, going up against a 31-year-old, basically that's, you're in your prime. So we've seen all we're going to see from Miles Johns, unless he, just makes some crazy title run, some miraculous title run. But yeah, I got Gene Matsumoto. To me, this one's also a no-brainer. A little bit of reach advantage on Matsumoto's side as well. I think he'll do well. I think he showed a lot in that Rob Font fight. He's got a lot of will in him.
I don't know about the line at minus 300 though for Gene Matsumoto, to be honest. Like Miles Johns is a guy who manages to keep fights pretty close. And I'm also going to take Gene Matsumoto in my pick here. But just that minus 300, I'm like, really? Like, Miles Johns will make the fight probably competitive. I kind of think it goes to a decision here. And I don't know, man. I don't think I would lay that chalk on Gene Matsumoto, but I am taking him as well here. Now moving on, we have a featherweight bout between the prospect killer Christian Rodriguez versus not a prospect but a veteran and Andre Fili. And this is one that I've been going back and forth in my head in pretty much all day while prepping for this pod, because you see what Christian Rodriguez does when he goes out there and fights a prospect. We saw it when he fought Austin Bashi. We saw it when he fought Chiwiwiz. We saw it when he went out there and fought Isaac Dolgarian. And there's another prospect I'm even missing there as well. But then you see what happens when he goes and fights a veteran like he did in his last fight, and he gets handed a loss. And it seems to be a common theme throughout the career of Christian Rodriguez. And you look at Andre Fili, and you just don't really know what you're going to get, to be completely honest. His last fight, he went out there, got subbed in the guillotine after he got out of the guillotine, put himself right back in it. And it was kind of like, dude, like, what are you doing? What's going on? And then you could see him go out there, use his range, and strike his way to a pretty good performance. So he's just a big question mark in my head. But my rant is probably going on for a little bit too long now. So, San, take this one over from me.
Yeah, I too have been having a very tough time with this one. Mostly because to me, the way Christian Rodriguez fights and the way he approaches the fights, he can really take advantage of those younger guys in the cage, just with experience, I think. And he can kind of see those, you can kind of expose maybe those weaknesses and show these young guys something that they haven't seen before on the mat. So it is tough seeing him fight against a guy like Andre Fili, who obviously has a lot of experience in there and knows exactly what he's doing. You're not really going to show him anything new that he hasn't seen in the past. I hate to say it, but actually I don't. I think I'm going to go with Touchy Feely here, man. I love the guy. I think he's great. He's a good personality, first of all. I think he's a guy you always want to win. Definitely a good value on him, too. Plus 190 is pretty sizable. It's a good straight bet. And, yeah, I think he's just going to be able to use his experience. I mean, Christian Rodriguez just takes advantage of those younger guys. No Diddy, but he can really just expose those holes and spot them. And I don't think he'll be able to use that to his advantage this weekend against an experienced Andre Fili. So I'm taking Touchy here. Kind of a Hail Mary, not really, but like I'm kind of just tossing it out there. I wasn't too sure on this one. And I really like the value on Andre Fili here, so I'm going with him.
Damn, son, I really think you just talked me into it. Like I said, I was pretty undecided going into this pod whether I was going to lean the Christian Rodriguez route. 12-3, beat some pretty highly touted prospects, but outside of that, like you said, that's hit. Lost to Mizakel Costa, lost to Julian Arosa. Both guys, coming off his last two losses were veterans that fight in the exact same style as Andre Fili. Mix it up, can show you a little bit of everything, utilize what they've learned in the cage, through their past fights. And it's like the one kryptonite in Christian Rodriguez's armor. If you're not 6-1 or 8-2, the guy loses. So I'm going to go Andre Fili here, like you touched on. I think the veteranship will get it done, and the odds being a 2-1 underdog, throwing him straight for a little bit of money and then maybe throw him in like one singular parlay, keeping it a little safe, maybe get a big payout.
It is funny how they made this matchup with both of them coming off that loss to Costa. It was both of their last fights. And they were only a span of a month apart, actually. He got rid of Christian Rodriguez first and then subbed Andre Fili a month later. And I will say I was initially on Andre Fili because of the reason of you even look at who Christian Rodriguez has beaten and the prospects he's beaten. They're all super wrestling heavy. Like Austin Bachi, very wrestling heavy. Raul Rosas, very wrestling heavy. Isaac Dolgarian's also a wrestling heavy guy. And I forget who the other one was. I think it was Cameron Simon, who, I'm not going to really call him a wrestler per se, but it's not like he's going out there beating a bunch of strikers, but I just can't really trust Andre Fili. I don't know which version of him we're going to get. And Christian Rodriguez is still very young. I mean, he's 27 years old. He has to be continuously getting better. He's a good striker. He's a good wrestler. He's kind of good everywhere. But I think his problem is he almost seems to fight up and down the competition, it seems like. And I don't even know if competition's the right word since, like you touched on, Sonnet, he does take advantage of these prospects and just has the experience and he knows these wrestlers are going to end up gassing out come the end of round one. Like Bashi beat him in round one. Rounds 2 and 3, the gas tank wasn't there. Same thing with Raul Rosas. But I am going to side with C-Rod here. I'm going to side on the side of youth and just not being able to completely put my trust in Andre Fili. So I'm going to go with C-Rod. And moving on, we have a women's strawweight bout between Yasmin Lucindo and Angela Hill. It seems like every time Angela Hill fights, it goes to like a split decision. So this one, a bit tough to predict here, but to me, it kind of comes down to volume versus power a little bit. I think Hill will have the higher output. Lucindo will pack more power in those punches, and it is a pretty decent women's matchup here. I don't mind watching Angela Hill fight. She is 40 years old now, which is pretty crazy. But for women, we've touched on it before. As the age goes up, it doesn't affect them as much as it affects men. It seems like, at least, I know it's something you've touched on as well. But with that being said, Ryan, let's hear your thoughts on this Hill-Lucindo matchup.
Yeah, it seems like every time I pick against Hill, she busts a parlay for me, or she just goes out, proves me wrong, and wins. So I'm going the opposite camp here, and I'm going to take Hill this time around. You know, like I said, it's another one of those guys like Andre Fili where she's 40 years old. She has plenty of fights in the UFC. You know, the career's just up and down. It's like stack 2 wins, get a loss, stack a win, then a loss, stack 2 wins, and then lose. Coming off of a win in her last fight, split decision, like you touched on, Zach. I just think that she's seen more. I like the veteranship. I think pretty much all my picks now are going to be based on veteranship after what we've seen this year in terms of a bunch of highly touted prospects and undefeated fighters just getting demolished by veterans in the UFC. And I think Yasmin Lucindo, that story will be no different. I have Angela Hill sneaking out a questionable decision in this one, just because if I go the opposite way, she'll probably KO her. So we'll go Angela Hill here.
Well, I'm going to test your luck here. I'm going Yasmin Lucindo. I also have that problem with Angela Hill. I bet out against her a few times and have had her opponents in a few parlays and just absolutely busted my shit. But we will see what happens this weekend. We'll see who's less lucky with the Angela Hill fights. I think Yasmin is just younger. She's quicker. She has heavy hands, like you touched on, Zach. She's a really good striker. She's pretty slick on the ground too. And I think she'll just have that little bit of speed and power advantage that'll be able to, maybe turn the judges her way if it does go to that split decision again. I think from what I've been seeing and from what, I guess articles and reports I've been seeing, they're trying to move the judging more towards the damage side, rather than just complete volume. Obviously, volume still plays a big part. But I just see her doing more damage, and I think, at 40 years old, it's going to be more visible. And she's just going to be a little bit slower, so she'll end up getting caught those few times that are really going to make the difference. So I'm on Lucindo here. Probably going to be a decision, but I think we could see a KO in this fight.
Yeah, I guess I'm the one deciding where Octagon resides as far as this matchup goes, and I'm gonna side with you here, Ryan, and I am gonna go with Angela Hill. As much as I don't like, but also kind of like to say it, I actually do like Angela Hill. I don't mind her. She's a decent personality and whatnot. And yeah, Son, I agree with what you say about damage-based scoring. I mean, that is the main criteria as far as the judges score. And I do see Lucindo being able to land the bigger shots, but Angela Hill is very tough in the clinch. I don't think she's really going to get wrestled too much here. I think the fight will, majority-wise, play out on the feet. And I could see Hill just having enough more volume to outweigh some of those powerful shots of Lucindo. And therefore, I'm going to side with Angela Overkill Hill. And my face was frozen. I'm back. And moving on to the co-main event, we have Steve Astro Boy Erceg taking on Odie Osbourne. One thing to note here, Astro Boy is moving up a weight class for this fight, so this will not be at featherweight due to the opponent pulling out, Odie Osbourne coming in on short notice. And before I dish this over to you, San, I just want to point one more thing out. I was listening to Astro Boy today, actually. He was on the Anik Florian podcast yesterday. They had him on as a guest, and they were kind of picking his brain about what needs to change for you, being on this three fight loss streak. Obviously, he was against three very formidable opponents, one which being the champion, another one there being the knockout who the fuck? Why am I blanking on this right now? Yeah, Kaikar France, and then he just lost that decision to Brandon Moreno. And the thing he said was, he's like, listen, like a lot of times I was going in there being like, wow, I'm fighting Brandon Moreno, and I kind of lost myself a little bit. And at the end of the day, these guys are fighting Steve Erceg, and what I lost was my killer instinct. A lot of times I was worrying about more so the positional things and the scoring of it. And I stopped hunting for my submissions. I'm very dangerous in the jiu-jitsu department. I stopped hunting for my big shots on the feet. And I think Astro Boy will be able to get back to hunting for those finishes and just being dangerous. That's something he kept on mentioning. I got to go back to being dangerous. And I think in this match against Odie Osbourne, he will be dangerous. I think it's a good matchup for him. I think he is probably better everywhere this fight goes. His boxing is very, very good. Odie Osbourne does have power, so Steve Erceg does have to watch out for that, especially early round one. But I see Astro Boy getting Odie Osbourne down to the ground, and I see him really locking up a submission within the first couple rounds here. But Sam, there's my prediction. Let's hear what you got to add to this.
Yeah, I mean, in my eyes, I think the UFC world is healing. I mean, the younger guys, younger prospects are winning this year, doing really well. The champions are defending the belt well. And most importantly, the comebacks for some of these fighters, like we saw with Paulo Costa not too long ago, are happening. So I think the right things are happening in the UFC, and I think Steve Erceg, getting a nice win here, and I think a finish as well, would be big, and I can definitely see that happening. I mean, Odie Osbourne is good. I mean, he had a really nice knockout win his last fight. But let's be honest. I mean, he hasn't faced anybody as good and as versatile as Steve Erceg is. And Erceg just has crazy fight IQ. I mean, he's really smart when he's out there in the octagon. And I think Steve Erceg is absolutely right. I mean, he's got to remember that these guys are in there fighting Steve Erceg. The guy that shot up to that title fight, pretty much as quick as you can. So I think he did well. I think he will do well and secure himself a nice comeback win here this weekend.
Yeah, I'm gonna make it a clean sweep here. I'm also going Steve Erceg. Found out recently he, although he doesn't really use it in the octagon, he's a national wrestling champ in Australia. So, that part of his game's there when he decides to use it. I know he shot on Pantoja in the 5th round, and everyone was like, damn, what the fuck are you doing, dude? You don't shoot that takedown, you might be the champion right now. But besides the point, like you said, Son, tougher competition. I mean, there's no shame in having this be like his 5th UFC fight, his 6th UFC fight, and having already fought Pantoja, Kaikar France, and Brandon Moreno. No tall tasks in any of those fights, or no easy tasks in any of those fights. Very tall tasks. And I think this puts him in a position to win. Thing to note, Odie Osbourne's taking this on short notice. While Steve Erceg's had a full camp, and he's not going to have to deplete himself down to 125. It will be a bantamweight bout, which only serves to favor him more. So I'm going Steve Erceg here. I think he'll be able to mix it up everywhere from the striking to the wrestling to the grappling, and just work out a full game plan if he decides to use it. Like you touched on, Zach, the power of Odie Osbourne is there. He dropped Rodriguez at UFC Noche in his 2 fights ago, I want to say, and that had a lot of people worried, because he was coming in as a pretty sizable underdog in that fight. But then Rodriguez just used the grappling and the wrestling to control the rest of those 2 rounds and end up getting a victory. So the kryptonite's there. It's just whether or not Steve Erceg wants to capitalize on it.
I'm gonna be honest. I didn't realize that Australia had wrestling as as far as
Brother,
Islam
Australia
Makhachev
don't
would
have
say.
wrestling.
No, but yeah, Steve Erceg's grappling is wicked, and I would love to see Steve Erceg get back in the win column and see him make another run at it. So I'm excited to see that, and I'm excited to see what he looks like at bantamweight because he was even talking about he's like, wow, like I can drink a normal coffee. He's like, usually during fight week I'm drinking black coffee, but I'm kind of chilling right now. It feels pretty damn good. So I'm excited to see him in the bantamweight division and see what he can offer, and hopefully he can get back in the win column. And moving on to the main event, we have a fun one. We have Roman Dolidze taking on Anthony Fluffy Hernandez. Fluffy's riding like a seven fight win streak right now. Pretty damn impressive. On the other side, Roman Dolidze has a 3-fight win streak. Most recently, he took out Marvin Vettori in a UD fashion, which he looked good in. And one thing to note about this fight is obviously Fluffy has the wrestling and the cardio. He's just in your face going. Roman Dolidze is a very formidable grappler as well. His jiu-jitsu is very good, but he kind of does gas out a little bit in fights. So if this were to go into the championship rounds 4 or 5, that could be a bit scary for Roman Dolidze given Fluffy Hernandez's gas tank. But with all that being said, Ryan, let's hear your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, weaponized cardio is the name of the game. It works for Rob, it works for Anthony Hernandez, and especially as you get up into the heavier weight classes, being able to keep that pace at 4 or 5 rounds, even 3-round fights gets only more impressive. And I think, like you touched on, Roman Dolidze, very slick grappler, very competent on the ground, very good on the ground. Anthony Hernandez is the same way, and I think the first 2.5 rounds, maybe 3 rounds of this fight will be very close. But then I think the cardio is just going to become the ultimate deciding factor as to who wins this. In rounds 4 and 5, once you realize Anthony Hernandez isn't slowing down, I think at that point Roman Dolidze will be easier to control on the ground, and it'll be easier to work over some grappling positions, get some sweeps, and maybe potentially find a finish. But if not, write a comfortable unanimous decision based off those championship rounds.
Yeah, I really want to go Dolidze here. I don't know if I'm gonna. I really been tossing this one up. I think there's a lot of really good value on him. I think he's definitely worth a straight play. He's kind of like Dricus du Plessis in the sense that he kind of just like bull rushes you. He kind of just like puts the pressure on. And with Dolidze, technique isn't always the most effective route to victory against that guy. So I really wanted to go Dolidze, but every bone in my body is telling me that I should go Fluffy here. I think you guys are right. I mean, he does have the cardio advantage over him. You know what? Fuck it. I'm just gonna bite the bullet here. And go Roman Dolidze. I think he's gonna be able to pull one out. Everything is stacked against him in this fight. I think cardio is obviously gonna be dangerous. But if he's so dangerous on the ground and he's never been submitted before. That's really, the main way that Fluffy's going to get you out of there is submitting you. And I think when he realizes that that's not exactly going to happen with Dolidze is going to be able to pull him in the deep water, hold him down on the ground, maybe get a heel hook or two in there. And we'll see how good Anthony Hernandez's jiu-jitsu and grappling really is. I think it's a big test for him. Dolidze is a very strong guy. I think he definitely has the physicality advantage over Fluffy Hernandez here. And you know what? Fuck it. Yeah, I'll take him as my official pick. I think that's the guy that I always doubt. But he knocked out Kevin Holland. He got a few really good decision wins over some formidable fighters. And I think it could happen again. I think he's definitely been training the cardio, and that's definitely something that's on his radar that he knows he has to fix, especially against a guy like Fluffy Hernandez. So I'm going to Dolidze here. Almost talked myself out of it, but I honestly feel pretty confident in this pick, as confident as you can be in a plus 275 fighter. So I'm going to Dolidze, and I'm praying for the best on Saturday.
One thing that I will point out here as well is while Roman Dolidze does have very good grappling, very good jiu-jitsu like we talked about, funny enough, he doesn't have a submission win. Granted,
Yeah.
that statistic is a bit misleading because in a couple of his fights, I think in the Jack Hermanson one specifically, he kind of had a cap slicer, had it locked up, and then Jack Hermanson was just kind of laying there on the ground, and then he got the ground and pound TKO, which very easily could have been a submission win. And then there was another one kind of similar. I think it was Phil Hawes, in which he tore up his leg. And I think it was the Phil Hawes fight. And he was like, oh, no, I want to continue. They get on the feet and then just whop and ends him there. So it's kind of funny that he doesn't have a submission win, yet he had two essentially submissions that led to TKO knockout wins. And that does scare me with Fluffy Hernandez's wrestling and just that constant pressure being in your face. It's likely going to go down to the ground. But I think that threat for Roman Dolidze is only going to be there for a round or two. And then after that round or two, the takedowns are just going to come much easier for Fluffy. The control time's going to come much easier. The submission threats aren't really going to be there as much. And I think as the fight goes on, he just picks up more and more momentum as classic Fluffy Hernandez does. So I am going to side with Fluffy Hernandez here. I think he might be able to get Roman Dolidze out of there later on in the fight, and if not, coast his way to rounds 3, 4, and 5, finding a UD there and getting the job done. But with that being said, fellas, that is our main card. Do either of you have anything else you want to talk about or more to add?
I was just going to say with the Dolidze thing, just getting back to it, I think it's kind of an advantage to him that he doesn't have a submission win. Obviously, he's put the threats there, and he's always dangerous in the ground game. But I think he doesn't have as much film to study as far as his submission danger there, which I think with Fluffy's fighting style could put him in a situation that he doesn't even know he's in danger in. I mean, Fluffy's lost in an anaconda choke before in the UFC, which is a pretty tough choke to pull off in general. And that's something that I can see Dolidze pulling off. We'll see how crazy he gets. But I think that's all I got to say on it. I think there's definitely more positives in the Fluffy Hernandez side, and definitely more points. But I think I'm just going to go with the gut and toss this one up there as well.
Yeah, with that being said, for everyone still listening, if you guys want to toss us a sub or a like, that is greatly appreciated. But the boys will be back soon. We have a few PFL interviews coming out that will be awesome. Both guys put on tremendous performances on who we will be interviewing. So make sure to tune in, and we will be back soon. Thank you all for listening.